If I had been voting, I don't think I would have voted for that book.
He just called himself stupid, so I can call him stupid.
They all just sound so good. It's the kind of crime novel that you really hope to read when you pick up crime novels. Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am very excited about this reading vlog. It kind of has a special place in my heart. Last year, was it last year? I feel like it was 10 years ago, but I think it was last year. I did a series for the Edgar Awards where I read through the nominees for 3 different categories: Best Paperback Original, Best Debut Novel, and Best Novel. Best American Novel, I think is what it's called. I read through all the nominees, guessed to which one I thought the winner was going to be, and then when the winners were announced, I gave my reaction. I didn't have time to do that this year. Unfortunately, I have a day job now and it's sucking up all my time. But I did want to do something with the Edgars. And so rather than reading through all the nominees and guessing the winners, by the time I decided that I was going to be doing this, it was already like April 12th and the winners were announced on April 27th or something. So I just decided to do a reading vlog where I read through all of the winners. So I'm going to be reading through the winners for Best Paperback Original, Best Debut Novel, and Best American Novel. So that's what this vlog is. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a good time watching this. I know I'm gonna have a great time reading these books. Let's talk about the Best Paperback Original nominees first. There were 5 nominees for this category. So the first nominee was Quarry's Blood. This book is by Max Allan Collins, and this appears to be the 16th book in a long-running series. The 16th and last book in the Quarry series. I have never heard of this series. Apparently this is the same author who wrote Perdition Road, which is a movie that I've heard of, never read the book. So this is like a new to me author and a new to me series. This professional hitman has retired, and of course he hasn't really retired. A hot woman walks into his life and drags him back into the professional hitman business in some form or another. This does not sound like my kind of book. I don't know if it's any good or not. If you've read this one, let me know if you liked it. The second nominee was On a Quiet Street by Serafina Nova Glass, and this looks to be like a domestic thriller set in a closed community on the Oregon coast. Obviously, this community looks very perfect from the outside. People are happily married, happily having families, but you know that that is all one big farce and that there's going to be boiling, toiling, troubling secrets brewing under the surface of this perfect community. I really think that this would be my kind of book. So I'm going to put this on my to-read list. The third nominee is Or Else by Joe Hart, and this also looks to be like another domestic suspense novel set in a small suburban neighborhood, featuring a mystery thriller writer. How meta can we get? Who is wrapped up in an affair with his neighbor, and then the neighbor goes missing, the husband is killed, and the mystery thriller writer decides to investigate. I think it could go either way. It could be either really good or just kind of really trashy. Then we have Cleopatra's Daughter by Carol Lawrence, and this is actually, I think, the only historical mystery on this list. This is set in 19th century New York and features a female journalist who is chasing after a serial killer who, when they kill people, leaves behind some kind of Egyptian artifact. This actually sounds pretty good. I don't normally read historical mysteries, but I do like the idea of like a female journalist chasing a serial killer. I'm not so sure about the Egyptian lore. It could be interesting or it could just be kind of blah. The final nominee for Best Paperback Original was A Familiar Stranger by A.R. Torr. Yet another domestic suspense, my friends. Domestic suspense is hot this year. This is about a woman who is an obituary writer. She has a husband and a kid, and she's just kind of bored with her life. Her family is disconnected from her. They really don't want anything to do with her because she's a boring wifey wife. I don't know why. That's the way that the blurb made it seem. Like, oh, this one's so boring because she's a wife. Wives are boring, said one wife to the other. So she's bored. Her family is like pulling away from her. She's unhappy. She meets a very mysterious stranger in a coffee shop, and one thing leads to another, and bing, bang, boom. Yes, they are having an affair. Of course, she's trying to keep that life separate from her real life, and of course, they're going to collide in some spectacular disaster, and we're going to find out that she's not the only one keeping secrets. I do like domestic suspense. I tend to not like these kind of like wifey mother stories where they're just like getting into trouble. I don't know. I haven't read that many, I guess. It could be good. I'm not saying no to this one. I'm saying no to this one for now, not forever. If you read this one, let me know. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if it kind of broke any barriers or did anything interesting. Because sometimes I feel like these books can just be kind of like very similar. Even with the ones that I'm interested in reading, like On a Quiet Street, it could either be really very interesting or very same. Those are the nominees. The winner for 2023 was Or Else by Joe Hart. And this is the one that I'm going to be reading in this reading vlog. And I'm going to start reading that. And I'm going to let you know if I think it's an award-winning piece of literature. Because, you know, obviously my opinion is the only opinion that counts. I was really hoping that I would be starting to feel a little bit better before I had to record this. I am going to be starting Or Else by Joe Hart tonight. I really would love to kick this cold at some point. I think that some version of me with this cold is going to be in a lot of videos that are coming out in the next few weeks or months, because I am reading a lot of different books for a lot of different vlogs, a lot of different themes, and I just so happen to have a cold for like the longest period of my life. No, it's only been like 10 days, but it feels like longer. So I'm looking forward to just resting with this book, to just kind of getting lost in it. I hope that it's going to be a page turner that keeps me engaged and distracts me from all of this garbage that's happening in my body right now. Yeah, I'm still feeling very not great. But I had to come on and talk about Or Else by Joe Hart. It's doing this thing that I don't really like in thrillers, where the characters are deciding to not talk to the police because they might be a suspect, which sometimes makes sense. But in this case, our main character supposedly cares about the person who is missing, and the information that he's holding back would be very beneficial to the investigation, and yet he's saying stuff like, oh, they'll just immediately lock me up. It's going to be better if I don't say anything about this right now. It's a very selfish choice, which is fine. Our character can make a selfish choice, but I do kind of wish I could see our character wrestling with this choice more. In addition to not telling the police what he knows, he's also decided to investigate the missing person on his own to see if he can try to figure out what happened to her. Again, I'm fine with that. I do like the amateur sleuth aspect. But as he's investigating, he's coming across evidence that actually would probably be really helpful for this investigation. His decision making is just not clear to me. I don't know if it's because I'm not feeling well, so this kind of book is just not vibing with me right now, or what. I'm rolling my eyes a lot, and that is not a good sign when I'm reading a thriller. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I don't see how Or Else by Joe Hart won for Best Paperback Original. To be fair, I haven't read any of the others, so it's not like I can compare them. Or Else takes place in this quiet suburban neighborhood, and we have our main character, Andy, who is a mystery thriller writer. How very meta. And he moves back to this neighborhood where he grew up. He's there to take care of his father, who is suffering from some kind of memory loss, some kind of dementia. When he gets there, he gets involved with a neighbor woman. He starts having a secret affair with her. And at the very beginning of the book, Andy gets a note from some mysterious stranger saying, hey, I know what you're doing. You better leave that woman alone or else, basically. Hey, that's where the title comes from. So Andy, of course, starts freaking out, and oh no, his whole life's gonna be ruined. But he doesn't want to stop the affair because he still really loves this woman. Cut to a couple days later, the woman and her children go missing, and her husband is found dead in their house. So this is the catalyst that pushes the whole book forward. And this is where we find Andy, our intrepid investigator, bumbling his way through an investigation that he should have very much left to the police. I think part of my problem with this book is that I didn't really find Andy to be a very sympathetic character. He just comes across kind of dumb. And he admits it in the book. He says, I'm stupid. I should be going to the cops. And I get it. With thrillers, you don't really want the cops involved. You want the amateur detectives. You want the people involved in the thriller to be the ones doing the investigating and getting into the trouble. However, this just did not work for me. And I don't know if it was just because he kept saying I should go to the cops and then never went to the cops, or if it was the reason he wasn't going to the cops wasn't good enough, wasn't big enough. A lot of the times a character will have a reason to not go to the cops that really makes sense, and so you can fully suspend your disbelief as to why they're doing the investigating versus the police. In this case, it didn't really make that much sense. He was very worried that he was going to be thrown in jail, and he wasn't fully thinking it through because obviously he had evidence that he was hiding from the police, and that would get him thrown in jail later if it came to light that he was holding onto this evidence, obstructing the investigation and all that. So it just didn't seem very well thought out. In addition, there's a lot going on in this book. There were a lot of ingredients to this thriller stew, and they did not all taste very good together. I also understand that you have to have a lot of red herrings when you're writing a thriller. This was too many red herrings, I think. Some of the threads came together at the end, and then others just unraveled into nothing, and so why were they even there? There was some strange attempts at like a character layer that just didn't really work. I don't know, it just all felt very frantic and clumsy and bumbling, just like our intrepid amateur detective. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that you won't like it. So if you're looking for kind of a lighter domestic suspense, sure, it was very page-turnery. You're gonna have to suspend your disbelief a little bit with some of the choices that Andy, our main character, makes. But if you kind of like that style, this book is actually pretty entertaining. It just wasn't for me. Let's move on to the next list of nominees for the Edgar Awards. This category is for the best first novel by an American author. So it's a debut category, American authors who are writing their first mystery thriller suspense book. And this list is good. It is full of so many books that sound so good to me, and I am a little mad that I didn't get on the ball and do the whole read through all the nominees. So I think I'm gonna have to come back to this list and read some of these books. The first one is Jackal by Erin E. Adams, and I actually have read this one. Basically, the premise of this is that a young Black woman returns to her hometown for a friend's wedding, and she does not want to come back to this hometown. She has really bad memories from it. At her friend's wedding, the friend's daughter goes missing into the dark woods, and this brings up a lot of past trauma for our main character. And basically the idea is that this is not the first young Black girl to go missing in these dark woods. And so our main character digs into her past and into the present missing day case to try and figure out what is going on in this white Rust Belt town and why all of these young Black girls are disappearing. The next one on the list is Don't Know Tough by Eli Craner, and this is being pitched as Friday Night Lights meets American Gothic. It does sound like it's going to be grit lit involving football. According to the blurb, one of the very best players on this team in Arkansas, he is coming from an abusive home and is lashing out. He's violent, he's hurting other players, and his coach, who is a born-again Christian from California, steps in to try and save him, to try and get him on the right path. And I don't know, things go wrong. Shudder by Ramona Emerson is one that I have had on my to-read list. I have been eyeing this book since I heard about it coming out last year. It sounds so good. It sounds right up my alley. I really want to come back to this one at some point and read it. So this is about a woman who is working as a forensic photographer, and she has grown up on the Navajo reservation, I think. She has kind of left that life behind and is trying to solve these crimes as a forensic photographer. She's working with the Albuquerque Police Department, and it sounds like there's some supernatural element in here where she can communicate with the ghosts of the people who are found dead, and they kind of point her in the right direction, give her clues. And yet this gift is also a curse. It backfires on her, puts her in danger. She is isolated from friends and family. People don't really trust her because of this. And I don't know, this just sounds really good. The fourth nominee for this category is More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez. This is about a true crime writer who is chasing down the story of a woman who loved two men and one of them ended up dead. You know, I love me a good true crime writer getting themselves into trouble story. The final book nominated in this category is Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee, and this is a heist novel. I like a good heist novel. I guess it involves a student, a Chinese American student who is going to Harvard, and he gets involved in this scheme, a wealthy man reaches out to him and says, hey, I need you to go in and steal back some of this art that was stolen from our culture, from our families. But it also sounds like it's going to be dealing with some Western colonialism themes, with Chinese American identity, and this one sounds really interesting. It's definitely a book that I would love to visit at some point, that I would love to read and see how it is. So yeah, like I said, a lot of these are going on my immediate to read list. The funny thing is that the only book I wasn't really interested in reading on this list was, of course, the winner of this category. So congratulations to Eli Craner for Don't Know Tough, which won the category for Best First Novel by an American Author. That is the one I'm going to be reading for this vlog. Here it is, Don't Know Tough. I will admit to you that I am not much of a football fan. I think I had a Dallas Cowboys phase where I watched the Dallas Cowboy games because a boy I had a crush on liked the Dallas Cowboys. Sports. It's not just the football that I'm not really interested in. I actually don't really like the grit-lit style of thriller and suspense. I think sometimes it could be done really well, and other times it can just be it's difficult for me to read. So I'm gonna start reading this one and let's see how it goes. Maybe Eli Craner will surprise me with this one. Checking in to let you know how You Don't Know Tough is going. Yeah, about 100 pages in, and y'all, I think I kind of like this book. It is definitely that grit-lit vibe, but it's also giving me like Megan Abbott vibes, which I think, no, she doesn't blurb it, but I think I saw somewhere in a review or something where somebody was saying there was some Megan Abbott vibes, some that gritty, darker, character-driven style. I'm finding myself really engaged with these characters and really like thinking about this book when I'm not reading it. I'm feeling very drawn to it, wanting to pick it up to see what happens next. These characters are kind of getting under my skin a little bit. They're working their way into my heart in spite of the football. There's not a lot of football in here. Yes, there is a football team, a high school football team that is going to the championships, and their star running back, who is going to be the one who wins them that playoff game, is getting in trouble. He's gonna have to be suspended from the team. Someone is dead, and it is affecting the coach and the player. And we have multiple narrators, which I'm enjoying, because when I first picked it up, I originally thought it was just going to be the kid, the football player, the running back, telling the story, but we also get the coach's point of view and the coach's wife a little bit. There's a lot happening in this book, and I'm enjoying it. Enjoying isn't the right word, because it's gritty, it's dark, it's painful to read at times, but it is very engaging, and I am invested in where the story goes and what happens to these characters. And so that's a sign of a good book. One of my very favorite things about reading is when I think a book is going to be the worst, when I think I'm going to hate a book and then I end up just completely loving it. That is honestly one of the best feelings, when a book takes charge and surprises you and shows you something that you weren't expecting. That's how I felt when I was reading Don't Know Tough by Eli Craner. I was expecting this kind of grit-lit, male-driven, just book that wouldn't hit with me. A book that wasn't going to connect with me, just a book that wasn't for me. And what I found instead was this very sensitive story, this very well-developed character study, which also had a very engaging plot and a lot of dark themes that I was fully invested in. This book is about a young man, a man in high school who is a football player. His mother is dating a man, is living with a man who abuses her and abuses the family. And this high school boy is kind of coming to terms with that. He's coming into his manhood. He's coming into himself. He's finding his power, and he's taking it out on other people in ways that aren't appropriate. Then you have the football coach who is new to the team. He has come from California and is now coaching this team in Arkansas, and he's trying to find his place as well, trying to understand these boys, and especially our main character, Billy, I think is his name. The coach is trying to understand where Billy is coming from, what he can do to help, how he can kind of help save this kid. But that's going to be difficult considering the entire town just thinks Billy is a lost cause. They don't believe in this coach. They think he's just this know-it-all from California who doesn't really belong here. There's just this big, tangled, beautiful knot, and it's a lot of pain, but there's hope here too, which is always kind of my favorite balance in a book where you have really dark themes and bad things happening, but then you have that spark of hope or that humanity that shows up on the page. And I think this book did really great with that. So yeah, such a surprise. I was totally thinking that I was going to hate this book, that I wasn't maybe going to finish it, and here I was just ripping through the pages, could not put it down. It was captivating. I was riveted. There were so many moments that were unexpected, so many moments of darkness, light, just all mixed together to make this beautiful kaleidoscope of humanity. I can see why this one was the winner for sure. There were a lot of things with the style of the writing and with the storytelling that really stood out, and with the character developments and the themes. So yeah, I agree with this one. I think this is a great pick for the winner. We've come to the final category of the 2003 Edgar Awards. This category is the Best Novel Award. Let's talk about the nominees for this category. And then let's find out which one I'm going to be reading for this vlog. The first nominee is Devil House by John Darnell. This book is about a true crime writer who is making a living off of his storytelling and making movies, and then he gets an invitation to go to film a movie at a house that is notorious for some grisly murders that have taken place. There seem to be some themes here with art and ambition and obsession and fact versus fiction. There does seem to be an element of the satanic panic in here. This one sounds pretty interesting. I've never heard of it. I haven't heard of this one before looking at the nominee list, but it does sound like it could be an interesting, intriguing type of book. The next nominee is Like a Sister by Kelly Garrett. A reality TV star is found dead, and people think that she died from an overdose, but her half-sister, from whom she's estranged, thinks that something else may have happened, thinks that it might be murder, and so she embarks on this investigation that probably isn't going to go well for her, I'm assuming. The next nominee is Gangland by Chuck Hogan, and this looks like a book about gangs, specifically about the mafia. And I think this may be based on a true story, based on a mafia capo who was never caught, who was doing bad jobs for his boss. Is the capo the boss? I don't know. All I know is what I saw in Sopranos. Secrets, mafia, FBI involvement, based on a true story. Not my jam, but it might be one of yours. The fourth nominee for Best Novel in 2023 is Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. A man is on death row for murdering some women. The story is told from his point of view, I believe, but also from the women whose lives were affected by his murders. This one sounds like it could be pretty good, pretty literary. It sounds like the kind of story that I might like. The final nominee for the Edgar Awards 2023 Best Novel . The final nominee for the Edgar Awards 2023 Best Novel is The Maid by Nita Prose. I have read this book. I did not like it, but a lot of people really did. It has cozy mystery vibes. There was some funny slapstick type comedy, but ultimately I just found the characters kind of to be uneven, the character development just to be kind of off. There was just something that didn't really sit well with me in the end when I finished this book. Okay, but what is it about? So The Maid is about a maid who works in a very fancy hotel in New York, and she finds a dead body in one of the rooms while she's cleaning, and the whole investigation kind of centers around her. She is both an amateur detective in this novel and also a suspect. Have you read any of these nominees? If so, what did you think? Let me know in the comments. For this vlog, I am going to be reading the winner, which is Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. I'm excited to dig into this one. Let's see where we go. I feel like I've been struggling to kind of get back on track recently. I don't know, maybe I'm experiencing a little bit of burnout.
Trying to do too much again. That could probably be it. I've been having a hard time getting back into writing, having a hard time settling in and doing any reading. I don't know, I just feel kind of distracted, which happens. I think as humans, we just kind of go through cycles, you know? We have like high energy days followed by some lower energy days. I try not to dwell too much on it or work myself in too much of a tizzy about it. I try to think like, hey, so if you're feeling this way next week, maybe take a deeper dive into why you're feeling this way. And usually by next week, I'm feeling more energetic and more on track. But this week, I am just a distracted mess. I started reading Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukovka. Sorry if I butchered that name. I have downloaded the audiobook. I've borrowed the audiobook and I'm switching between the physical copy and the audiobook because I'm having kind of a hard time concentrating on either one for very long. But I'm finding that the switch between the two is helping me concentrate on the story, which I'm actually really enjoying. It's very engaging, quite detailed, quite interesting, quite sad at times. So the book starts out with a man, Ansel, who is on death row. You get a glimpse of him in the prison and stuff that's going on there, but then you also flash back to moments in Ansel's life that have brought him to this place where he is sitting on death row. But we don't see them from Ansel's point of view. We see them from the women in his life. One of the first chapters is from his mother's point of view. There's a girl who he was in foster care with. There's also the point of view of his girlfriend's sister. So just a lot of threads being twisted together into this really layered, in-depth character study of this serial killer, this man who has lived a very violent life. I'm about 90 pages in, and we don't quite know all the details of Ansel's misdeeds, but we do know that he has killed people, that he's killed women. This is a more literary style of mystery, and I am really enjoying it. The writing is great. The character development is so good. There's just a depth and an intrigue, and it's not like an edge-of-your-seat thriller. It's this kind of quiet, slow burn, and it is very much involved in uncovering why this man has ended up here. The stepping stones in his life, or the moments that have been critical into making him into the man that he is when the book starts, the man on death row. Not like a super happy book, but it's really good.
Notes on an Execution. Let's get into it. This book shook me to my core. I sit here kind of astonished and astounded and still just thinking about these characters, about this story that Danya Kukovka unraveled, roped me into. I'm having feelings about it, and they're not all good feelings, or like they're feelings that I feel like I should be ashamed to have, because here's the thing, is that I have never empathized with a serial killer more than I did with Ansel Packer. So, bravo, Danya Kukovka, for making me feel things for a terrible monster murderer. That, I think, is why this book was so powerful, why it felt so unique, why it stood out to me, because of the depth of care that the author took with the characters, with their arcs, with examining their emotions and the roads that led them to the places that they go to. So we start out Notes on an Execution with Ansel Packer, who is in jail for murdering 3 girls at some point in his life. Come later to find out there is a 4th, and he is sitting on death row, and he is 24 hours from his execution. And he is still in this place where he thinks it's not going to happen, where he has this plan to get out of it. So we follow Ansel Packer through the last 24 hours of his life and everything that he goes through and thinks, and like the emotions that he's sitting with as he kind of reflects on the choices that have led him to be on death row. In addition, we get 3 different women's points of view, and this was also such a unique way to tell this story, to have these different glimpses of these 3 women and the effect that Ansel had on their lives, but also the effect that they had on his. There are lots of secrets that are revealed as the story moves on, expectations that were set up that were quickly overturned, and just a lot of, wow. This is like the fact that this book won, bravo. I did not read all of the books on this nominee list, to be fair, but I don't know that I would have picked any other one based on just like the descriptions of the books. this one was so good. It was just a really nuanced and emotional story to tell, and really cut to the bone, was very realistic in a lot of ways, but also just very human. And I think that while the author gave plenty of room for me to sympathize with the serial killer, she also gave plenty of space for me to sympathize and empathize with the women who he hurt, the women whose lives he affected. The writing was powerful, it was literary, it was poetic, it drew me in. There was a lot of small moments and bigger moments. This was a book that I read slowly. It was not a page turner, but not in a bad way, if that even makes sense. It's just like a very in-depth, fascinating character study, a study of emotions, a study of humanity, a study of hurt, a study of murder, a study of death, a study of crime, a study of so many things. So many things came together in this book in such a beautiful, moving, powerful way. This might be one of my favorites of the year. It is not very often anymore that I read a book that pulls me in so deeply with the characters and makes me feel so on fire under my skin for them. I don't know if that's just because I'm reading the wrong books, or maybe I just read too often, or because I'm also a writer and so I can kind of see behind the curtain a little bit, and so I lose some of that imaginary, that like living inside someone else's skin feeling. But this book took me back to that place where I did feel like I was walking in their shoes. All of the characters, even Ansel Packard, the serial killer. It was just one of those reading experiences that you come away from feeling like this is why we have fiction. This is why we have stories. So that's gonna wrap up the 2023 Edgar Award winners. I wanna know if you've read any of these nominees from any of the 3 categories and what you thought of the books, or if you're gonna pick up any of these now after having seen this video. I will really try to plan next year, like get ahead of the game, because as fun as this was to read the winners, I really did like reading all the nominees. And I don't know if I'll be able to get through all 3 categories again because of the timeline, the framing of it, but I wanna try, because that was really fun to me to read through every single nominee and then try to pick the winners. And then that way I also found some books that I wouldn't have picked up on my own. So come back next year. I mean, please come back sooner than that. I enjoy having you here. But for the Edgar stuff, let's see what happens next year. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for reading along with me. I can't wait to see you in another video very soon. Until next time, happy reading. Don't get murdered.